itself, along with Mark Levin's Liberty amendments, has sparked this discussion, and we'll discuss some of that tonight. This will be examined by our two guest attorneys, who are constitutional experts, to give their solutions to the problems of Congress deficit spending and the national debt. I'd like to introduce Mr. Nick Dronius from the Goldwater Institute to start with. Nick holds the Clarence J. and Catherine P. Duncan Chair for Constitutional Government and is Director for the Center of Constitutional Government at Goldwater Institute. In addition to practicing constitutional law as a member of the Goldwater Institute's litigation team, and he mentioned tonight they're right in the middle of litigation on the Tombstone water issue, Mr. Dronius has authored numerous articles covering a wide spectrum of issues in constitutional and regulatory policy, including protection of free speech, state sovereignty, and reformation of excessive regulation, the guarantee of individual liberty. We're privileged to work with him on a number of issues. His articles have been published by leading law reviews, bar journals, and think tanks across the country. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Nick, and he will give us his...
Thank you. First of all, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful to the John Birch Society allowing for me to present my view and the neutrality of the introduction. I'm also grateful that Joe and I finally get to meet. A couple of years ago, we enlisted Joe in a peer review of an early version of what has now become the Compact for a Balanced Budget. I think in that discussion, Joe saw a lot that he liked. Unfortunately, was unable to come to our side on the issue. But I encourage everyone in this audience, by the time I'm done, to join with us and support the Compact, because I think you'll see that if you want to use the power states have to originate amendments, using an agreement among the states is the best, safest, easiest, and most certain way to accomplish it. And we've actually designed it as a compromise to recognize the deficiencies that may exist in not having a compact approach, where you don't have all the process filled out in advance, where you don't know what amendments you're going to get in advance. So the compact is an effort to reach out to those of you who have been afraid to have Article 5 deployed by the states, and to incorporate your concerns and to find a reasonable ground, a common ground between us. Now, with that said, I'm going to try to be pretty quick. I'm going to turn on this projector over here. Hopefully it'll work.
Is there a way to kill the lights up here so it doesn't drown out? Well,
actually,
that's the reverse.
The spots that we need killed.
They take a while to warm up.
It's on.
It's on. It takes 30 seconds. Everybody should get fingers in there. Some of us could solve that problem.
Give it a little time.
All right. Well, eventually I'll have a PowerPoint presentation. It'll be exciting. And
If the computer's up.
It's on.
I don't think so, no.
yeah, it doesn't usually fire up that high. Okay. Well, it was working before.
Is the computer ignited?
Let's try this again. Hey! All you have to do is plug it in.
All right. Have you got enough light to see the computer? I have a flashlight if you want it.
You know. Here we go. Nope, it's going to work. Everything's going to be good. All right. All right. Now, none of that counts towards my speaking time. Right? Right?
Correct.
Okay.
10 minutes down.
All right. So first of all, what is Article 5? I think to some folks in the room, it might be sounding like I'm speaking in code. And I don't want that to be the case. So let's take a look at Article 5 really quickly. Article 5 is a part of the Constitution, the United States Constitution. This is the text of the relevant part of Article 5 that we're going to be discussing today. And the reason why I like to lead with this is so that everyone knows textually what we can figure out about Article 5. Now, some very important things can be determined just looking at Article 5. First, I'm sure we're all familiar with the congressional mode of proposing amendments. Well, that's this portion right up here. 2/3 of each house of Congress will propose amendments. Right in between that portion and the ratification portion that requires 3/4 of the states, 38 states now, to ratify, in between those two clauses is the portion we're talking about tonight, the portion of 2/3 of the several states applying to Congress for a convention for proposing amendments. Now, I'd like to highlight the placement of that text for a very basic reason, which is this. If this power were meant to be fundamentally different than this power, and if the founders were reasonably competent drafters, would they frame the article this way? The answer is no, it doesn't make sense. I mean, if this were a different power, why would it be in the same sentence as the earlier power with Congress? Why would it be ratified by the same process as the congressional proposal of amendments? The only way this makes sense, if we presume the founders knew how to draft things, is that we're talking about the same amendment power exercised in two different ways. The same power does not mean that one power is a blow up the Constitution, reset everything over and start from scratch, and the other a tweaking power. They are both the same amendment power. And let me also emphasize, you often hear that if you have a convention, you have to have multiple amendments. And the argument goes something like this. Look at the word is in the plural. It says a convention for proposing amendments. That means it has to be more than one. But if you look up here at the congressional power, is that the singular or the plural? It defines the power of Congress to propose amendments in the plural as well. And we know that Congress can propose individual amendments. And I point this out to highlight that this is a common usage throughout the Constitution. The plural is not used to exclude the singular. It's a shorthand to include both the plural and the singular. The states, through a convention, can just as easily propose a singular amendment as Congress can based on this text. Now, there are some questions that you can't resolve just looking at the text. You have to look at context. You have to remind yourself of other principles. But the text is actually remarkable in what it tells you about the process alone. So let me highlight how remarkable that is. Remember how Congress must call a convention on the application of 2/3 of the several states' legislatures? Well, if you look at the meaning of application at the time of the founding, all an application meant was a petition for relief. That's all it was. If you look at the words shall call in the context of law at the time of the founding, all that meant was a mandatory obligation. Now, if you put the two things together, what does that tell you about the convention? If Congress is just supposed to be like a robot in responding to a petition that the states make, what does it imply about the structure of the convention? Well, we think it's fairly clear that if Congress has no discretion and simply must rubber stamp the application that comes in, that means that the relief sought in the application is necessarily granted, which means the convention that is called necessarily conforms to the application. It's as simple as that. Who controls the application? The state legislatures do. So textually, if you interpret the language used in light of the usage of the time, it seems fairly clear that the states were meant to control the process. And indeed, that kind of makes sense. Why would Congress have two ways to propose amendments? I mean, obviously, it seems that that would be redundant, and there's a rule against interpreting constitutional provisions as redundant. So my point at this stage is just to highlight the text. There's far more support for the interpretation that the states control the amendment process than just the text. But I'm highlighting the fact that the text is perfectly consistent with the evidence that shows the founders believed, represented, and promised the states would control the convention for proposing amendments, directed, treated as an instrumentality to achieve the amendments that Congress never will give us. Now, with that said, I know that Joe is far more intelligent than this. He is a nuanced constitutional scholar. He has raised a number of very respectable arguments in opposition. So I don't anticipate any of these arguments will be made today. But if they are made, I want to explode them now. There are things in the Constitution that can only be fixed by amendments. It's simply a fact. Finally, you get, I guess next to finally, you get the argument, hey, horrible things will happen if Article 5 is used. Look at Hawaii just passed an application to constitutionalize Obamacare. So what? That's like saying because somebody's going to vote for a Democrat, I'm not going to vote. Or I'm going to vote. The reality is whether we use Article 5 or not, it is in the Constitution. It doesn't go away when we stick our heads in the sand. So all we're doing is we're ceding that power to the opposition. And then finally, I always hear this. Nobody follows the Constitution. There's no point to another amendment. It's all gone. Everything's tyrannical. If that were the case, why do you care? Why? What's the big deal? So we have a runaway convention. We started with the runaway convention. We got a runaway convention, right? I mean, be logical. These are not respectable arguments. And believe it or not, although I'm sure Joe will not make them, many folks on his side of this issue will. And so you should call them out. Now, let's pull back a second. I need a little breath. I want us all to do a thought experiment. Just bear with me, even those who are opposed to Article 5. Imagine the following world. Just imagine this. Just suspend disbelief and anger and objections. Imagine a world where it was normal for the states to originate amendments to Article 5. Where it was normal. Where it happened as often as ballot measures do in the states. Just imagine that world. Whatever you think, suspend judgment, just imagine that world. Now, what do you think would have happened during the TARP debate? Now who here knows what TARP is? Okay. Who remembers the debate? Okay.
Was there a debate?
It was a very intensive debate. I'm about to get to that. The problem with TARP was, you may recall, it took 2 votes to pass it. Because the American people rose up during the first debate and said, no, stop. I mean, 80% plus of the American people, I mean blue, red, purple, I mean Maine to Arizona, everybody said, stop TARP. And they voted it in anyway. Now, imagine the dynamic if in the world, the mythical world we're talking about, where it was normal for the states to use the Article 5 process. Imagine if alongside the same pitchfork waving, the same supermajority of red, purple, and blue states were organizing around what 47 states already have a version of in their Constitution, which is a gift clause that bans subsidies for the banks. Now, I'm not saying that they would necessarily get to the threshold triggers for Article 5. I'm not saying that they would actually get to ratification, but think about how that would change the political dynamic. As Congress is ignoring the voting population, you've got Maine, Massachusetts, Arizona, California, Colorado, ticking off one application after another towards a convention for proposing a gift clause that would take away the power to bail out the banks. Now, that TARP vote was decided on the margins. If you can imagine a world where you had 25, 26, 27, 30, 31, 32, all going to the threshold of 2/3 to organize a convention for proposing a gift clause amendment, don't you think a couple of votes would have changed on the margins? Considering that it failed the first time, it took 2 votes to get there? So, maybe you're not convinced yet. Maybe, show of hands, who's not convinced yet it would make a difference? Got 1, got 2, got 3. Okay. Who remembers Obamacare? All right. We're never going to get rid of it, by the way, without an amendment. But imagine during the Obamacare debate, as they were doing the Cornhusker kickback, and the Louisiana Purchase, despite having Democrat control of the presidency and Congress, they still had to virtually bribe people to get this thing passed. And lie to them, bribe and lie to them, right? That's how close it was. Now imagine if the 28 states that later sued over this were instead organizing through their attorneys general an amendment like the Healthcare Freedom Amendment in Arizona's state constitution. And as the debate was proceeding and they were lying and bribing, you had 5 states, 10 states, 15 states, 20, 25 states, and the threat, 26, 27, 28, the threat of taking away complete power from the federal government to even touch healthcare policy was on the table. Don't you think on those marginal votes, at minimum it would change our likelihood of success, whether we got to the convention or not? Now, with that thought in mind, take the right turn. most of you seen them. Has everyone seen The Matrix? Anybody not seen The Matrix? All right, well, bottom line is, here's the reality that we now face from the national debt. And the reason why I bring this up is, this is as calamitous to our republic as Obamacare or TARP. Maybe even more so, because you know who we're burdening? People who never had a voice. Our kids, their kids, who never had a chance to fight. That is our real curve right now. Now that's a broken system curve. That's not just bad politics. Now you're going to probably say, oh, Nick, you're cheating. That was nominal. That's not really what matters. You need to look at inflation or GDP. Well, look at GDP. I mean, you could go to usdebtclock.org. You see the gross federal debt is now 107% of gross domestic product. That's where Greece was 6 years ago when everyone panicked. Italy right now, where they're still getting bailouts and everyone's on the verge of worry, they're at 130%. At the current trajectory, we're going to be there in 2 to 3 years. I mean, this is not sustainable. Now, don't tell me we can grow our way out of this. You know, some folks look at the 50s and 60s and see how it came down after World War II, and they say, don't worry, we can grow out of it. There's a difference today. We're not the only economy standing. We've got a few competitors in the world. And not only that, we've actually already mortgaged all of our future. We have almost $220 trillion in unfunded entitlement programs that they didn't have in the 50s and 60s. All of the future tax flow is already spoken for. This is a calamity. This is going to crash the country. This is leading to a system crash unless we fix it in the next 3 to 7 years. And don't tell me it's getting better. Just because the deficit closed from $1.1 trillion a couple years ago to $650 billion now, it's still in the hundreds of billions of dollars. We're still bleeding out like there's no tomorrow. This is not sustainable. And don't tell me that we can just default.
We defaulted.
Computer can.
They can. All right.
What about the one on the floor?
Yeah. I guess it blew a fuse. All right.
Yeah, they probably turned.
There we go. Thank you.
Check the power line on the projector.
That's the thing. 13 years ago. Do you realize that within 3 years they nationalized their equivalent of 401ks, their retirement funds that people had, and replaced their real assets with government bonds they couldn't sell in the market because they defaulted? See, the problem is we now live, for better or worse, we live in an interconnected world of trade agreements and ridiculous non-real trade agreements. You know, we live in a world where, in order to participate in the wider economy, we are stuck with having to pay our debts. If we choose not to pay our debts, it will trigger default clauses that will cut us out of international trade across the board and crash our economy. So if we default, we will experience what Argentina did if the picture came back, and that is Argentina's Air Force One being sued and being seized in Senegal, Africa. But let's take another.
There it is.
Here's the comment. Hey, how about that? All right, so this is a real story, by the way. A hedge fund actually went into Senegal, Africa, and seized Argentina's Air Force One, and was litigated over for a year. Not only that, but there's a federal court right now that's trying to seize the assets of the pension funds for the government of Argentina that were inadvertently kept in the United States after the default. So this is not a serious option. Not if you don't. This is just a quicker route to the system crash.
Could we do that now?
Now, you're about to say, well, let's look at Washington. Washington will fix things. Every balanced budget amendment Congress has ever proposed has had loopholes. They'll pretend to tie their hands and they'll feed themselves anyway. And here's the reason. There's a fundamental structural problem with debt. And that is we have the debt setting its own credit limit. I mean, think about how ridiculous it is. Imagine if you ran a bank and you had a guy come up to you for a revolving line of credit and he said, hey, you know, I'd like to have a loan here and I want to set whatever my credit limit is whenever I want. And then 5 years later, you're wondering why you went out of business. This is a structural problem. And it's particularly bad in a democracy because guess who gets stuck with the costs? Non-voting future generations. People that politicians today don't listen to. How can they? I mean, even the best of our politicians can't possibly know what those interested people want. All they have is all these real live voters in front of them. So structurally, all that happens if you don't have a limit on debt, if you don't have the debtor not in charge of his own credit limit, is a spiraling out of control, crashed system like all of the statistics show. It can't be any other way. How could it be any other way? So what would Thomas Jefferson do? Believe it or not, a mere 9 years after the final ratification of the Constitution, when Rhode Island got involved, Thomas Jefferson is writing to a friend furiously going, I can't stand, the government is growing outside of its constitutional bounds. And he said if there was just one thing that he could have included in the original constitutional design that would restore the Constitution to its original principles, we're talking 9 years after ratification, it was to take away the power to borrow. Because he recognized, this is what he recognized, the incentive structure to grow government is unconstrainable by mere parchment if you have unlimited debt. You will grow because you will buy votes. It doesn't matter what the parchment says. You'll get the votes, you'll buy them with unlimited debt. So he recognized that if there's a way to keep government within its bounds, it's to take that away because there's no effective check politically. You have to change the fundamental law. So how do you do it? It's hard, because here's the problem. If we're going to do an amendment, we need 38 states. That means some really gosh darn blue, purple states. I mean, you're talking about Maryland, you're talking about trying to convince, Illinois even. I mean, this is hard. This is hard stuff. We've analyzed this with polling data. Only 39 states are realistically in play for anything that could do any good. Okay? We got a margin of 1. And maybe not even that 1, because that used to be Virginia. So the bottom line is, how do we get there? Well, you can't have a perfect amendment. We can't have something that just declares that our view of the Constitution is the one that will henceforth reign, because you know how many states you're going to get behind that? We'd be lucky if we got Arizona. So what you need to do is create an amendment that accommodates other points of view, but then structurally incentivizes the system to trend towards the right result. You know what Milton Friedman said? Politics, the art of politics involves getting the wrong people to do the right thing. That is the art of politics. And so that's what this amendment tries to do. Here's how it tries to do it. First of all, let's stop the games with the debt. Real simple definition of a balanced budget: limit spending at all times to cash in the bank, with one exception. A revolving line of credit, the debt. That's your one exception. Now you're probably going to say, well, what good is that? Well, right now, there's all kinds of ways that the government can play around to hide debt. They can base it on projected budgets. They can base it on not paying bills. They can base it on floating checks and telling people not to cash them. So what we want to do is we want to channel anything that is not spending based on taxes to a clear, narrow option. A revolving line of credit consisting of plain vanilla bonding. And we want to cap that at a specific dollar amount, not a GDP amount, a dollar amount that can't be gained by Congress changing definitions. The other thing we want to do is we do want flexibility in that debt. Why? Because what if there's a war? What if there's a crisis? What if there isn't enough cash flow to handle a war or crisis? Do you want to have a loophole that Congress gets to interpret? I mean, we'll never stop having wars then. So, but you need to have some flexibility. So how do you fix this? You take the power over any flexibility in the debt limit out of the debtor's hands. You do what we do with our school boards. School boards can't write their own bonds. They can't just issue their own debt. They have to do a referendum. The same with most cities. We don't trust our federal, we trust our federal government more than we trust our cities and our school districts. And we know how bad that is. So at minimum, we need to have a structure where a referendum process is involved in approving any flexibility in the debt limit. And what we propose is that the states have to approve any increase in a federal debt limit that's constitutionally set. Now notice, you can't be in favor of repealing the 17th Amendment and be against this. The 17th Amendment originally allowed for it took the states out of controlling the U.S. Senate. That means before the 17th Amendment, the states controlled half of the whole federal legislative power, including the power to borrow. All we're doing with this referendum process is returning to the states a small portion of that power with far less potential for abuse. We're just giving the states control over yes or no on a debt throttle. That's all we're doing. And so if you would ever support the repeal of the 17th Amendment, and going back to the states being in control of half the whole federal legislative power, you can't possibly logically be against this. This is a smaller degree of power. This is a less potential for abuse. And the benefit of having state legislatures involved is as bad as they are. You know, you lose some, like Medicaid expansion, but you win some, like healthcare exchanges, right? Whatever, it's not guaranteed to work. We're not guaranteed to throttle back the debt all the time, but we have a better shot here than we do in D.C. And again, we're trying to design an amendment that can get to 38 states, that can create a reason for the wrong people to do the right thing. Now, you're probably going to say, well, who's going to enforce the debt limit? How do we know they're just not going to ignore it and just do anything? Well, we actually build in a process where the president has an obligation to exercise his impoundment power, which he already has. This is not a new power. The president has the inherent power to impound spending if there isn't enough cash flow in the bank. If the president has 3 bills to pay and only $1 to pay it, it can't. The president has discretion not to pay it. But what we want to do is, instead of the president using that as a tool at the midnight hour, as we see time and time again, threatening veterans' benefits and everything else, is force the president to start designating impoundments months before hitting the debt limit. What this amendment says is the president has to start designating those impoundments to protect the debt limit at 98% of the debt limit. That 2% spread at current borrowing rates means you have to do it within 3 to 6 months before hitting a debt limit if it were ratified today. So that means the president has to lay out on the table everything he's going to impound 3 to 6 months from now and take the heat for that. And in response, the Congress will have 30 days to override them with equal or greater amounts. This will frame up the debate over the next month or 2 or 3 with a realistic set of numbers that people can talk about to frame what we're going to do about the debt. It's going to stop the panicky, lift the debt kind of discussion. And by the way, if the president doesn't do his job impounding them, it's an impeachable misdemeanor. And before you say nobody's going to enforce it, think of it politically. Congress did the appropriations. Congress would be responsible for violating the debt limit, for triggering a sequester across the board of 45% if the debt limit is not enforced. So why do you think Congress wouldn't impeach the president? Obviously, they want to shift the blame to the president. They say, he did it. He didn't do his impoundment. It's not our fault. So the structure of this, again, is to incentivize good behavior by bad people. Now, you're probably going to say, how do we know they're not going to raise taxes to fix the debt? Well, first of all, if you pay back your debt, it's what that is. Taxes. Debt is taxes. Limitless debt is limitless taxes. So first recognize that it's wrong to have limitless debt if you don't believe in limitless tax. Current generations or future generations, the right thing to do is to tax current generations. But that doesn't mean we want to destroy the seed corn, because we do need to grow something to pay this stuff down. So you want a balance between the interests of the future generations and the current generations. Here's how we propose striking it. You require a supermajority vote, 2/3 of the whole number of each house for any new tax or tax increase. But you have a few exceptions.
Federal or state?
Federal income taxes, federal sales taxes if they ever emerge, etc. Okay? But then you have a few exceptions. You retain the existing requirement of simple majorities for switching over to a sales tax. Not a bet. For closing credits, deductions, and loopholes. For tariffs and fines. Now you're probably going to say, well, they could raise a lot of money that way. Yeah, they could. But think, again, of the political dynamics this sets up. You're channeling the fight for revenue to the narrow gap. Who here saw 300? Who knows about Thermopylae? Spartans.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we are channeling the push for revenue to the most narrow gap possible politically, where the pushback from the special interests will be the strongest. This may actually be harder to accomplish than jumping the 2/3 hurdle, or at least close to it. But here's what it will signify. If anyone gets through that narrow gap of special interests and succeeds in raising those revenues, it probably is a genuine consensus that's not motivated by narrow self-interest of the current generations, right? Right? So that is the compromise that we come up with. Now, let me ask you this. What's the chance that Congress is going to do this on its own?
Zero.
Exactly. Hence, we go to Article 5. Now, I don't know how much time I have left. 8 minutes. This is going to be very fast, because everyone's going to say, well, Article 5 is going to be a circus, right? It might even be worse than what we've already got. We might get crazier amendments than the 17th Amendment and the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition, right? We might get even, it might turn out to be a coup d'etat and take over the world. But let's first frame this out in realistic expectations and risks. What do we have right now? Now, what's the worst that a runaway convention can do? I don't know, maybe that, an unelected body that
New constitution?
that can't be reviewed, that can do just about anything?
Move the Second Amendment.
New constitution?
We already have this. See, folks, if you're looking for a runaway convention, it's there. It's there right now. See, the difference with Article 5 is we're just shifting the locus of power to a place that's a closer place for us. It's not guaranteed we're going to win every fight, but it's closer to us. It's better than going down to Washington. And if you're on, so, the reality is, what's the alternative? Come on, you can't tell me just replace current people. I mean, Bush had all three branches, and what happened? It grew the government. It's not going to work. I mean, we get the same thing over and over again, no matter who we have in Washington, and it's because of the structural problems that exist. They're further from us, they're surrounded by special interests, they've got this debt that they can just expand whatever goodies people want at no current political cost. How can switching out those people make a difference? It can't. So, how do we use Article 5? I've got a lot more to go, but I'm going to end in the next two slides. The rest of it we're not getting to is going to be an analysis of the compact we can save for the question and answer period, an analysis of the original founding era evidence that I promised at the beginning we can't get to. But I just want to highlight one thing about Article 5. It's hard if you don't use some compact, some agreement. You got to have 100 pieces of legislation involved. You have 34 state applications. You got to have a congressional call. You got to hope that the states get somebody there. You got to have 26 delegates there. You got to hope that the convention generates something. I mean, my fear is not a runaway convention. My fear is an endless convention of grandstanding for votes and media attention. I mean, that's my concern. But assuming that the convention generates something, then Congress has to do that, and then 38 states have to ratify it. I mean, this is not easy. This is crazy. In fact, Patrick Henry said when there were 13 states, this was a fraud. This was a ruse. That there was no way the states could navigate it with just 13 states. And he had a point.
And he didn't have any navigators.
Exactly. So, and there's other legitimate questions. I mean, on the front end, the Milton Friedman, Ronald Reagan effort of the 80s that John Birch Society blocked is still going 40 years later. I mean, we don't know when it can get done. On the back end, on the ratification side, we've seen things ratified in 3 months or 202 years. So it's completely random. If you're going to try to rely on the Reagan-era stuff, I mean, the problem is they're just a grab bag. It's unclear that they're ever going to aggregate towards the 2/3 requirement. So, here's what we're proposing in the compact for a balanced budget. It's finally a plausible approach to Article 5, because we've consolidated everything in the process into two overarching pieces of legislation that not only make it plausible, but actually completely safe. First, you have a state compact, which is just a fancy name for an agreement among the states. Second, you have a single congressional resolution that is going to be an omnibus resolution, meaning it has at least two parts. In the state compact, you will designate the amendment that will be considered at the convention in specifics, like I just described. You will designate that a commission formed and organized and run by the states will handle all logistics and enforce all the limitations. It will include the application to Congress required by Article 5. And you know what? You're not going to let it go live. You're going to use what's called a conditional enactment to make sure it only goes live when 38 states join the compact, not 34. Why not 34? Because we want to get to the end result. Why start something you can't finish? When 38 states join the compact, the number for ratification, it triggers the application. That then triggers in the congressional resolution the call. The call then triggers the delegate appointment, already specified in the compact. Arizona designates the Senate President, the House Speaker, and the Governor. The convention rules are specified. The delegates are instructed, or else they forfeit their position and are recalled automatically, to put in place rules that require an up or down vote on the amendment. There's scope limitations that bar all the 38 states from ratifying anything other than the amendment that's contemplated in the compact, that nullifies anything that happens other than an up or down vote on that amendment. It literally declares it null and void ab initio. It is nullification in the compact. Now, assuming that the amendment is approved by the convention, that will trigger in the congressional resolution the preloaded ratification, the pre-ratification referral. When that goes live, it will trigger the preloaded legislative ratification in the compact. Boom. In 39 pieces of legislation, 38 states join the compact, one congressional resolution you can get done, what would otherwise take 100 pieces of legislation plus, and you can get it done in principle in one session year. This is the only vehicle that can fix the debt in time. And the one feature that we've added, courtesy of a criticism from Joe Wolverton a year or so ago, is a sunset clause. One of the comments that Joe made in the past was, well, what happens if this thing never achieves it? It might create another form of government. It might become somehow more powerful. Look, this thing dies in 7 years. It self-repeals in 7 years. Why 7 years? We haven't fixed the debt in 7 years, it's too late. Then we need a national bankruptcy amendment. So that's what the compact for the balanced budget is. It's the balanced budget amendment I walked you through in a vehicle that's plausible. We're targeting this in 3 states this session. It looks like we're going to succeed in at least 2 of them. We're then going for 18 and 18. We want to get this done in 3 years, and hopefully we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. We appreciate it. Featured on LouRockwell.com, the Ron Paul Forums, and the 10th Amendment Center as well. The InfoWars, The Guardian in London, England, and the Business Insider, among others. Joe's also a featured speaker on the nationwide program Nullify Now, the tour that lectures frequently at Campaign for Liberty events. Joe is here tonight. He's come down all this way, and it's a privilege to let you hear from him now.
I got a couple inches on Brother German, so I'm going to lift this up a little bit. I got a couple inches and a couple here. I'm going to turn it off for right now, because that's probably going to be something that's better in the question and answer, along with, because it'll probably marry up better with Nick's, the rest of Nick's presentation that he didn't get to. I hate this meeting. I hate this meeting so much, y'all. And first of all, I'm not from Utah, I'm from Memphis. I live in Utah because someone dragged me. I hate this meeting. I hate that people that agree on so much are sitting here insulting each other. I don't think that's the right way at all. I do not think that. And I will tell you, and Nick can testify, that I've participated in that myself. And I have apologized in print for that, because I have come to see that's the wrong way to do things. I am a Christian, and I do not believe that's the way Christ would have me behave. Now, that being said, I do believe that our body politic is eaten alive with tumors. Tumors of statism, tumors of progressivism, fascism. I think there's any number of tumors killing our beloved republic today. How many of y'all agree with that? Clap if you agree with us. We all agree with that. Every one of us. Now, y'all know that I recommend the scalpel of nullification to the chainsaw of Article 5. Y'all should have laughed at that.
We got it.
It's time for a chainsaw.
And it never is time for a chainsaw. And let me tell you, boy, there's so much to say on this. I want to say something. There's been some things said that I said that the Convention of States people and the Compact for America people were supported by George Soros. Well, I know for sure, those of you who've read what I wrote, know that I never said that. Never said that. What I said was, George Soros supports many groups with his billions that are calling for an Article 5 convention. Now, I'll tell you what. Nick Dronies and I agree on 99 out of 100 things. I have quoted him in articles. I have interviewed him in articles. because almost everything we agree. But my spidey sense goes off when George Soros is backing anything, because I don't agree with anything that socialist snake has to say. Not a single thing. So that sets off my spidey sense. And I can't imagine anything we would agree on. When it comes to the love of our republic, to the love of our Constitution, are we not all members of the same church?
Yes.
Yes.
We may be sitting in different pews on this issue, but I don't want the dialogue to become so vicious and so vitriolic, so full of hatred and hurt feelings that we can't come together again down the road when we are needed to be united. And I fear that. I don't like the thought of people thinking, I'm going to win the Article 5 argument. I don't want to win any damn argument with all of you good people. I want to stand with you because I know you stand with me. I know we agree on these things. I'm not going to sit here and portray us as being in different camps. I hate the thought of it. Because there is no excuse for us, constitutionally minded people, to waste our time, our talents, and our treasure tearing each other down. When what we should be doing is uniting to tear down those perpetual palaces of power that have been unconstitutionally constructed along the banks of the Potomac. Amen?
Amen.
Sorry. My family, a long line of circuit preachers. This is the way we go about our business. You only get paid if you get people showing up. So what I propose is this, and this is something that I think I mentioned it to Nick. It may have been to someone else that's pushing for the Article 5 convention. I propose that we form a committee. Tonight I propose this publicly, which is the first time I've mentioned it publicly, that we form a committee, the best and brightest among us. And I am not assuming that I would be on that committee. The idea simply came to me as I thought, how can we keep from destroying each other? Let's form a committee, the best and brightest of those who favor an Article 5, those who favor nullification, and anything in between, as long as it's constitutional. Let's take a step back and let's a committee of war, if you will. And we're going to take inventory of all the weapons in the arsenal of liberty. And let this committee recommend when each of those weapons are deployed, where and when. And then bring it to all of us. Bring it to the common church of constitutionalists. Let's not have this anymore. I hate when I see people sending me email that a year ago were sending me email saying how happy they are that I'm on this side, how much they like what I have to say, and now it's just pure vitriol over this. I just don't think that's the way. I really don't. So that's what I propose. Y'all figure that out. There's a lot of smart people in here. It does remind me, though, there is someone who is, I think we can say, supports Article 5, Rob Nadelson. He wrote an article about a month ago on the 10th Amendment Center, and he said, he was speaking of nullification. There are conservatives who say that nullification is unconstitutional. Yeah, I was shocked too, but there are. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, on this issue of nullification, I sense us being pulled apart. Us meaning constitutionalists. I sense us being pulled apart. And he said, I sense that there are leftists pulling these levers. Divide and conquer, a phrase that Alexander Hamilton used in the Federalist paper. Divide et impera, right? Latin. Divide and conquer, divide and command. And I like what he had to say about that, because I'm scared of that too. It's taken on almost an air of inevitability, hasn't it? There's money, millions on both sides of this, being thrown into this war. And I'm thinking, boy, what could we do with those resources if we just took those 99 things that we agree with and really put ourselves into it? And I'm not saying, Nick said that there are apparently people who say Article 5 should never be used. So I'm certainly not arguing that. And any of y'all who are on my side, notice the giant air quotes? I'm tired of that nonsense. Any of y'all that agree with me, please do not do that in your arguments with other people. Please do not, when you try to convince people that an Article 5 is dangerous, please do not say there's never a reason for Article 5. Please do not say there's never a reason to amend the Constitution. That makes no sense, and you weaken yourself when you say things like that. All right. So, that said, I believe in something that I read one time. Kylie, you going to give me the time so I don't go over? Okay. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Have y'all heard that? Where did I read that? Who knows where I read that? Someone knows.
The Bible.
What's that?
Bible.
The Bible. Come on. Out of the abundance of heart, the mouth speaketh. I hear a lot of what Nick said. If you support this, then you can't support that. If you do this, then you can't do that. That does not sound like language that I prefer to use. That sounds like statist, you will do this, you will think this, you will be logical. If you think other than me, you're illogical. I resent it. I have no ego in this. I have skin in this game because I'm an American. I don't care if you're a constitutional attorney, if you've got 20 letters after your name, or you dropped out of the 6th grade. You have as much skin in this game as I do, right?
Yes, right.
I refuse to allow anyone to tell me that if I don't agree with them, then I'm not right thinking. Then I'm not thinking about it the right way. It's unacceptable. Unacceptable. Much of, Nick had a slide up here of Article 5. Failed to underline a few key points of Article 5. One in particular that I think should be underlined. And I wish I had his slide up here to show you. But you'll have your constitutions, you have it memorized. It's not only the state legislatures that might be called upon to ratify any proposed amendments. Who has their constitution out? Ma'am, who else besides the state legislators might be called upon? Does anyone know?
Convention.
What's that?
Conventions, the state conventions.
Yeah. It's not the state legislatures necessarily. Nick failed to underline a key phrase in that. Or conventions thereof. Who's going to decide who goes to these ratifying conventions?
Who knows?
Congress.
Congress.
Each state? Well, good luck with that, brother. Let me suggest who Arizona might pack on that little committee.
Brewer, yay.
We know.
Who might they put on that?
The governor.
The governor.
Who else? Jan Brewer, good constitutionalist, she, right?
No.
Who else might the good state of Arizona put on
Our
there?
House Speaker in the Senate.
Have you heard of Sandra Day O'Connor?
Yep.
Have you heard of John McCain?
Oh, yes.
Those are proud Arizonans who might be called to serve on a convention thereof. Do you consider John McCain a conservative?
No.
Nick mentioned that George Bush had all three branches of the government. Do you consider George Bush a conservative?
No.
My goodness, no.
No.
Let's not say that the conservatives had control of the government. Hell, the conservatives hadn't had control of the government since 1814.
When was that?
When James Madison went belly up, so did the conservatives. But, alas. So let's not say that, and let's not highlight the parts we like and ignore the parts that argue against us. So when you're talking about these amendments, and yes, he's correct. He stood right here before you and admitted, did he not? It could be a circus. Let's name some of the things we could lose in this convention.
We could lose the Constitution.
Completely.
Specifically, what could we lose?
The whole thing.
Second Amendment. Let's do like McCain likes to do. He loves to say, we have the freedom to worship. Well, BS, Mr. McCain.
Right.
I'll be damned if we have the freedom to worship. What do we have? There you go. Is there not a big difference in that?
Yes.
If you give these people an inch,
I'll take a mile.
they will take a mile.
Amen.
Hey, thank you. Finally, someone knows how to respond properly. And, you know, over and over, they like to frame the debate. Now, Nick's a lawyer and I'm a lawyer. I earned my bones as a lawyer doing Fourth Amendment search and seizure cases in Nashville, Tennessee. So you got to frame the debate, right? Well, I say be careful of what falls outside the frame. Be careful what falls outside the frame. Because we already found that Nick goes, we can rely on the state legislatures. Article 5 didn't say that. We already found in a good state like the Grand Canyon state, there's a few conservatives who wouldn't mind taking a shredder to the Bill of Rights. And let's not even talk about some of the other states. Good Lord. New York, anybody? How about that Republican Mike Bloomberg? You know, and so give me the time. What am I looking at? I don't want to go over. Am I good to go? Good to go. There's a word that Nick, some others who are promoting this don't like, and that's the word could. Because they say this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and then this will happen, and this will trigger. It could. That could happen. We could have a wonderful, skip along the primrose path together toward liberty and freedom. Or we could be chained together
Yep.
and dragged to some statist gulag. And I don't want to be the most principled man in an orange jumpsuit. I don't know about y'all. That's not my idea of winning the argument. I'm going to shake my fist at you. But I hear Gitmo is beautiful this time of year. I'll be honest with you. I hear it beautiful. I will tell you one thing. Nick, at the beginning, his slide's not up there anymore because I turned my thing on. He quoted, sort of quoted, didn't really quote, but mentioned Patrick Henry. So it's always nice to put on the cloak of the founders, right? We all love to do it, me included. Me and TJ, he calls him, and little Jimmy Madison. We walk arm in arm when I write my articles too, so I'm not pointing any fingers without four pointing back at me. So he kind of mentioned Patrick Henry, said it's impossible to get this done. But then his last slide had an easy button. Is it impossible or is it easy? What's that?
He was talking about the compact.
Oh, the compact's easy, but Article 5 is hard.
Yes.
Okay. Because they don't work
Simple
together.
majority right now.
Hi, Brenda.
All right.
Okay.
Why Nick mentioned that under the compact, Congress would have the political motivation to place blame on the president for X, Y, and Z expenditures and impeach him.
Yeah.
Because Congress was the one that came up with the expenditures to begin with. Well, who made Obamacare a law?
Congress.
Why have they not placed the blame on Obama and impeached him for that expenditure? Every time,
Because they keep delaying it.
yeah, they're going to delay it. Who cares why? The point is they don't do it.
They don't.
They don't do it, and they're not going to
I'm
do
gonna
it.
teach him for Fast and
To say that
Furious.
under the compact, all of a sudden, Congress... It's just not going to happen. It just won't. Now, Nick said that nullification is not in the Constitution, right? Did he not say that? Nullification is not, maybe it's in the penumbras of the 10th Amendment, right, Nick? It's in the penumbras, the shadowy recesses of the 10th Amendment. Yet he says somewhere in the Constitution, the president has impoundment power. Can someone read Article 2 for me and find that in there? I'd really love to.
Executive order, that's
Fine.
where he has it.
Yes, and you can dance in the shadowy recesses and bring in the Supreme Court and hide with them in their penumbras and find any power you want. You can find the power to kill babies. Can you not?
That's all they do.
Right? So yeah, I guess we can find the power of impoundment in Article 2. But it's not there. And that's a big problem with the compact. You know, putting Article 5 aside, a big problem with the compact is, number one, it expands presidential power. Plain and simple. It expands presidential power. Number two, it allows Congress to spend money on whatever the hell they want to. There's no reinforcement of enumerated power in there. Congress wants to go to war in Ukraine. If the compact were in effect, they could do that. Regardless. If Congress wants to create a new entitlement, under the compact they could do that.
They can already do it.
Oh, of course they can. Well, they do it all the time. So despite Nick saying that he's not going to tolerate it and that it's illegitimate, I will say proudly that if we start to enforce the Constitution, we won't need to fix the Constitution.
Amen to that. Amen.
But we don't do it. Hence, people want to step into the gap. And that's what we have. Now, I know that Nick is a good constitutionalist and loves the Constitution, and that he's a wise person. And if we could have 100 Nick Dranises in the convention, I'd be all for it. I would. Sign me up today. But there's no way to do that. There are people spending millions and to turn this country into a democracy. I don't have to tell you this, you know this. Read the article where I supposedly said Convention of the States and George Soros were married in some secret Hawaiian marriage. I never said that. But what I'm saying is, do you know who Wolfpack is?
Yep.
Do you know who Wolfpack is?
Yep.
You don't, do you? They're sure as hell going to be at that Article 5 convention. They got billions of Soros money. coming out their ears. Watch the Young Turks. Write it down. Write it down. Young Turks. Write it down. Go to your YouTube machine and watch the Young Turks. Just watch them. Watch one broadcast. And if you who support an Article 5 convention are comfortable lying down with those dogs, please email me and tell me. I'm not hiding. You can find my email. Watch one broadcast. Try to watch a broadcast where they don't brag about being excited about Article 5. They are so excited to turn this country into a democracy, finally. And I'm sad that Nick used that word about this country, democracy. How many of y'all caught that?
Nope. Constitutional
like that.
Republic.
I know a lot of other men who did not like that word either. Men better than I. I believe. How much time do I have? 11 minutes. I believe that our Constitution was written by men who intended it to last for the ages. People say the Constitution is out of date. The Constitution needs to be changed to reflect the times. Nick
No.
spent 20 minutes talking about the dead. Well, there's a phrase I have about such a discussion, and it ends with the word Sherlock. Yeah, we know. And we're in that position for two reasons. Number one, we keep electing statists to Congress. We do not, Kimosabi, blame someone else. We keep doing it. We keep doing it. And number two, the states, Madison's bulwarks of liberty, right? Who James Madison said, what degree of madness would have gripped the United States to ever become the country that Patrick Henry warned us about in the Virginia Ratifying Convention. If y'all have not read that, in the name of all you hold holy, read the record of the Virginia Ratifying Convention. You want to know what Patrick Henry said? Read it from the horse's mouth. That forest-born Demosthenes, as George Gordon, Lord Byron, called him. Can you imagine? Do we have a single forest-born Demosthenes in this country today? No, no. But I'll tell you, James Madison said, what in the Federalist Papers? He went right home. He was present there that day when Patrick Henry gave his speech. He went right back to the boarding house where he was living. His little Jimmy was a delicate soul. It was raining. Went up back to his hotel, and he wrote a response, which we have as Federalist 36. I think it's at 46, 36. And he said, what degree of madness would ever grip the United States to become the country that Patrick Henry just described? If you read Patrick Henry's description and you don't think you live in those days, I suggest you get the Cliff Notes version, because we are living those days. But James Madison, what degree of madness? And he named 5 things. 5 things, he said, that would never, ever happen. Number 1, there would never be an overgrown military establishment. Swing and a miss, Brother Madison, swing and a miss. He said the states would never allow the federal government to abolish their state militias. Strike 2. He said the people would never elect traitors to office. I love James Madison more than the next guy. But on this one, we have that madness. And it's called Potomac fever. We send those sons of guns up there, and no matter what they say here, when they get there, they get constitutional amnesia. And so many of them Their lips draw nigh unto us,
That's
but their
right.
hearts are far from us.
That's right.
Amen.
Thank you again.
Amen.
There you go. And now, finally, James Madison said, the states would never roll over and surrender their sovereignty that they fought so hard for in the previous war. Well, I hate to be the one to tell him,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't recognize this place.
Nope.
The states, I can't imagine that the states would stand up and enforce some compact. They don't have the time. They're too busy jockeying for position at the federal feeding trough.
Amen to that. Amen.
So, it just ain't going to work that way. It's not going to work that way. It's too dangerous. It's unaccountable. We could lose this. I don't want a caricature of King Obama as a slide of the people who promote an idea. That doesn't sound wise to me. If that could happen, you better bet it will happen in America the way we are today. You know, I live in Utah. Tyler. I live in Utah about 20 minutes from that NSA monstrosity. Do you know how, ask my wife, she's here. Do you know how embarrassed I get when I drive by it?
I'm sure.
Not because the NSA abuses power.
Maybe because it's a new.
If government abuses power, it's what they do. If all men were angels, ... Men abuse power. We all do. Men think they get a little authority, they want more. We know that. Men are depraved in that way. But the thing that embarrasses me about the NSA Utah Data Center, doesn't that sound so charming? The NSA Utah Data Center, where we hold all of your electronic communications until infinity. In case you ever commit a crime against the homeland. Please don't ever say the word homeland without using air quotes. Or else, well, anyway. The thing that embarrasses me most about the NSA Utah Data Center is that it is there. Is that millions of conservatives, is Utah a conservative state? They think they are, right? They think they are. But millions of us drive by it. What would, can you imagine if there was a King George III data center in Richmond, Virginia in 1776? How long would the King George III data center have existed? Overnight only. Can you imagine? I would love to do one of those crazy back in time things and have Sam Adams and his boys and just go walk up to him at the tavern. Sam, what'd it do? Hey, did you hear about the King George III data center they're building outside of Richmond? And then I would just follow him, just sneak by. Well, I can't sneak, but you know what I mean. I'd follow. And that's not a shot at the government. The government. The government, what is the government? It's a collective will of all of us. That Utah data center exists because of us. We are in the trouble we're in because of us. Thomas Jefferson said, if you expect to be ignorant and free, you expect what never was and what never will be. And I think, unfortunately, that a lot of people flogging this Article 5 idea rely on the ignorance of some conservatives. But I will tell you, and he didn't refute it, there's a lot that could happen with that thing. And if we were living in a different time, I would feel differently about it. If that convention could be peopled with Nick Drenius, I would feel differently about it. There's no controlling who's at that convention. And don't tell me it's the state legislature. Don't tell me that. First of all, because that's not what Article 5 says.
That's right.
So if you're going to be a constitutionalist, they like to say, I'm not a true constitutionalist, right? Did you read that one? If
Yeah,
you're going to
I'm
be a
not either.
constitutionalist, then don't dissect or take your little pen and mark out parts of Article 5 you don't like. It's not necessarily going to be the state legislature. Convention could decide those things. It's uncontrollable. And we could end up, as he admitted in his slide, with a country you don't recognize. I don't want that. As I said in the beginning, I want to take a step back. I want all of us to put down our swords and our shields, our pitchforks, and our torches, and come together. Create a committee. Call it a committee of safety. We want to wrap ourselves in the cloak of the founders. Call it a committee of safety. And let's take stock of the weapons in our arsenal and make good use of them. But let's be careful that before we go and choose the nuclear option, we've made sure we've exhausted the other options. And it starts with us. If the state legislatures are going to stand there and shake their fist at Washington with one hand and cash the check with the other, out.
That's right. Amen.
Should we set up there?
Well, I'm going to do a couple announcements first. And thank you, Mr. Wolverton, for coming and sharing these things with us. And especially the novel idea about forming a citizens committee of Arizona security, or whatever you would have it. And I wonder if out of this meeting, perhaps we could even start revolutionizing things in Arizona, because as you know, Arizona takes 35 to 47%, depending on which study you use, of its money just to get through 1 year in Arizona from the federal government, and we cannot live that way. So in trying to finger the blame for the mess we're in, part of our problem is not just the broken electorate, but a broken system that our legislature follows. And I wonder if out of this group of well-meaning people, we could actually start moving to have Arizona wean itself off of the federal government and get back to statism the way the founders meant.
Yeah.
And I
Amen.
leave it up to you folks to put this together, because we cannot continue, and Arizona is one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 states, to constantly every year feed off the federal trough. We just can't keep doing it. So let's put our heads together on that. Just start a spontaneous communication, email each other, put your comments in to both organizations, and start working positively toward these solutions. A lot of the solutions we have not really tried. A lot of solutions we haven't really given it the gusto. But we claim we're out of solutions. All right, at this time I want to hold our drawing, because that's really the Article 5 and the balanced budget amendment. And I don't have a microphone, so will you please speak your question loud? Diane.
Yes, for both of you, if there was no Article 5, what else is available to us? What would you say? Give us 5 options for solving our problem.
Well, I know his.
And I know your age.
Each other's. You know, my attitude is, the problem we have is that the Constitution was amended by the 16th and 17th Amendments. And the 16th Amendment, of course, created, at least in a current court interpretation, literally unlimited taxing authority. I mean, there's now, it doesn't, I mean, it's not, maybe it's not what was intended, but it was a progressively inspired amendment, so maybe it was intended. But the bottom line is, right now, post-Obamacare, the federal government's powers are essentially unlimited through the taxing power under the current Supreme Court interpretation. And I look at that, and I look at the 17th Amendment with the states and their sovereign capacity having no role in national policy making. And what I'm concerned about there, fundamentally to me, we're already past the point of the federal government occupying every jurisdictional space of the states. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the next step, which is the treaties that are going to come. Because it used to be that the states having control over the Senate was our major bulwark against bad treaties. And depending on how the court rules this session on the relationship between the 10th Amendment and the treaty power, and there's a case before it right now that deals with that issue, we may find out that the treaty power is greater than the Constitution itself. It's not, but we may be told that. And so when you ask me what else can we do besides amend the Constitution, the concern I have, the reason why I'm focused on Article 5 is, as much as I love aspects of nullification, depending on how the term is defined, these things, these structural changes that have their root in amendments, take an amendment. And if you really ask me, push come to shove, say all the case law goes the wrong way, that, the 10th Amendment doesn't limit the treaty power is essentially able to trump the Constitution without an amendment. If we go down that road where the court could very well go, on top of an unlimited taxing power, we're backed into a corner as constitutionalists.
Well, let me just say this. Regarding if there was no Article 5, Nick and I would not disagree on anything. As far as this goes, more or less, that's the truth. I would say, here's the problem with the framing of that question. Again, remember the frame of the question. Be careful what lies outside the frame. The Constitution was not written to tell the federal government what they could not do. The Constitution was written to tell the federal government the narrow, small little list of things it could do. So I think the question presupposes the wrong thing. We don't have to find a way to curtail this growing beast and force it back inside its constitutional cage. I think all we have to do is realize, get it in here, that it does not tell the federal government what it cannot do. And too many of us as conservatives even argue that, right? It doesn't tell it what it cannot do. It says, here's a small list of things you can do. Anything, it's as the Convention of Statespeople, which is Nick is not a part of, they like to claim it's simple agency law 101. Well, I took agency law 101, and I learned that there's a principal and an agent. You have a contract. That is the universe of power of that agent. And when that agent acts outside that universe, outside that contract of enumerated powers, the principal is not bound by those acts. The principal being the states, the agent being the federal government. When the federal government acts outside that narrow scope of that contract we call the Constitution, we are not bound by its acts. Yeah. I'm sorry, you had your hand up so high. Yeah. Oh, am I not?
Several questions. Number one, how do you get the federal government, by what mechanism do you propose to constrain the federal government to not act outside its agency authority? Number one.
By what mechanism? See, again, you're presupposing the wrong thing.
No, I respect.
We don't have to say.
No, we do.
Where is there? No, because there's no power there. And if there be no power, it's illegitimate.
Right.
It's prima facie illegitimate if they do something
We all
outside.
get that in this room. We all get that in this room. Hang on. We all get that in this room. I'm not arguing the principle. I'm questioning the procedure to get there. And the reason is because government will. Does anyone in here think that government will not arrogate power unto itself?
Well, no, we all agree with that.
Okay, so right. So what's your mechanism to
Have we tried nullification? Yes or no?
Yes.
Oh,
No, we have not.
When have we tried it?
No.
Well, the Fugitive Slave Act in 1805.
Wait a minute.
In California right now,
we tried it with the
it's illegal
Montana.
federally to use marijuana.
We
But
tried it
they use
with-
it there, the state allows it. That's nullification.
We tried it. Yeah, he's right. We've done that in Colorado. We've also the Montana Firearms Freedom Act, in which the nullification did not work.
Real idea.
Have we ever tried
Yeah.
not sending the money or taking the money
No, we
from the
haven't.
federal saddle? No, we all want to
Amen.
keep the stuff.
Amen.
Where is that in the Constitution?
It's not.
It's not.
Yeah, but we have to stop that.
Right.
You are going to stop. This is the problem. This is the problem we as conservatives get into. This is the problem that we as conservatives get into. Who come and save us? Come and save us. Come and save us.
No, I'm not asking.
Physician, heal thyself.
I'm not asking for any saving. I'm asking, what is your mechanism of
My
enforcement?
mechanism
We
is
the
for
people.
to elect state legislators who uphold their Article 6 oath to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And if they do not, the founders have put something in the Constitution. It's called frequent elections. You're out.
We can't even get.
Amen.
We can't
Well,
even
good.
get somebody
Well,
out without.
Can be or can you not?
Is it all right if I respond? We've tried that. We've elected the right people, watched them go bad.
No, we have not.
Go bad. The election process has been a complete failure. It's been a complete failure for almost 200 years.
Because we the people are
The
stupid.
fundamental problem is the structural problem of the Constitution itself. The fundamental problem with the Constitution is threefold. One, unlimited debt authority. Two, unlimited taxing authority. Three, no role for the states in national policy making. That is a consequence of an omission, what Thomas Jefferson called the missing amendment in 1798 on the debt. It's a consequence of the 16th Amendment. It's a consequence of the 17th Amendment. And nothing short of an amendment can fix those structural problems, period.
That's right. But good luck repealing the 16th Amendment.
Right, it's not politically possible.
Good luck with
That's
that.
you try other angles of attack, like the balanced budget amendment, which provides for a tax limit.
And which expands the power of Congress.
It actually does not. It has no limit. Now, let me just respond to that. A couple of claims that were made.
How does he shut down?
Let's wait and not interrupt the speaker, please.
He's got to, let him finish his answer.
Let's finish, please.
The claim is that the balanced budget amendment expands Congress's power. It does not expand Congress's power because it defines it in terms of a spending limit. It doesn't say that Congress has to spend anything. It just says that if Congress is going to spend anything, it has to be strictly from the cash flow of taxes or plain vanilla bonding under a cap. And that cap is something the states will control in the spirit of the original structure of the Constitution, when the states control half of the whole federal legislative power. That is not an expansion of congressional authority. The claim was made that the president's impoundment authority was expanded. This is not true. If you have a treasurer, and the president and the executive branch will constitutionally have a treasurer, and bills come due at the same time and there's not enough payment available, the impoundment power comes into play. It is a truly implicit power. The problem is it's abused. Congress, what we see in every debt debate, is the president waiting to the midnight hour on the debt limit to say, oh my God, we have to start impounding veterans' benefits. The trick that we have to put into an amendment is something that regulates that power, that forces the president to determine what he will impound long in advance of hitting any debt limit, and force his cards on the table, force political accountability on the president, and make it possible for us to win the debate. Look, the fact is, if we just get a fair shot at the debate, we can win a lot of these debates, just as much as we can pass statutes that are nullification statutes. We won the healthcare exchange debate. We lost by only a couple of states, a majority of states, to block Medicaid expansion, but it was close, right? If we keep having fights in the states, we can win as many as we lose, which is a heck of a lot better than what we're seeing in Washington. And in order that they couldn't buy it anymore, that means the central bank would have to sell those dollars through other means than buying bonds, which is actually kind of difficult. And it can't be done on the scale that they've been inflating our money supply with.
What is that central bank? Where is it? Inside the government, right?
If it gives them a check on Congress, the private bond market was not mentioned in the Constitution. Therefore, it's extra constitutional. Therefore, if they have power over Congress, they are superior to Congress.
Okay, let's get through the questions
Let me
tonight.
respond to that, because borrowing authority is in the Constitution. Presumably
Private
borrow
bond
from
market
somebody.
is not, the creation of a private bond market is not in the Constitution.
What is
Who's
the
going to be in
Constitution stops the creation of a bond market? I mean, the Constitution allows for borrowing from someone. Markets organized to address that. That is a bond market.
Who does the Constitution allow borrowing?
It doesn't specify it. It doesn't restrict it. That means a private sector market. And that means that it's good
But when you-
to have a
that's
private
fine.
sector check the borrowing cost.
But when you place that private sector's opinion above an entity created by Congress,
Actually, it's a good
you heard it from him. That is a good thing. You heard that. Okay. Remember that.
Okay, next question right here.
I appreciate the time and the energy in this room.
But I think the energy is overcoming my understanding here, and I'd like to get some clarification. As I understand the argument for an Article 5 convention, it is because there are structural problems that have crept in over 200 years that need to be addressed. I accept that as a valid reason to do that. The response for nullification, which I'm not sure I understand nullification because, like this gentleman, I don't understand how you do that. And your response to that was, well, we elect people that are different. And I don't see how that changes anything because right now we've got a two-party system and both parties are in bed with each other and they're different in name only. So even though we think we have a two-party system, we still don't have a political separation of powers between them. So I don't know how we address that unless we get back to a structural means to control it.
I agree with that, and I think the structural means to control it is called federalism. And I think the states who were meant to form this bulwark of liberty as a check against the feds are gone. Their powers obliterated by the 17th Amendment and the 16th Amendment, because the 16th Amendment gives the federal government a printing press, and all the states want to line up with their handout.
So Arizona says, tomorrow we're not taking federal dollars. And
Good, finally, independent.
We'll take what
Finally a state that's independent in this country. Finally. That's what I would say.
Then you can use nullification.
Money supply out of
problem
Washington,
requires a structural
D.C.
fix. It's that simple.
It's got
It already exists, Nick. It's already there.
All right, in the back there.
I want to thank you both for being here. It's been great. You know, I definitely think there's a lot of, hey, if we get here, but my next question would be, if the compact was successful and you actually got there, you know, we talk about the unfunded liabilities. You know, I've heard all kinds of numbers. You know, you said 220. I've heard a little less. I've heard a little more. How do we pay for those? I mean, if we have a balanced budget amendment and we have all these increases of funds that, you know, quite frankly, we the people demand, sadly, and depending on the group of people, you know, whether it's, you know, the food stamps or whether it's the war stuff or whether it's Medicare and the cost of, you know, medicines going crazy or Social Security, whatever it is, and obviously they've paid into it for umpteen years. How do you deal with it? When it all comes down to it, the people are going to say, hey.
Yeah, you're right. It's a real problem. We don't have a whole lot of time. In 3 to 4 to 7 years, we're going to be exactly where Greece is. All the trajectories lead to that. And then there's no fix. There's just a system crash. That's the only way to stop it, period. So in the next 3 years, we're focusing on the compact. We've built the compact to sunset in 7 years because I don't think there's any point in pursuing it beyond that. That being said, here is the reason why we have unfunded entitlements. It's unlimited borrowing capacity. Why is it that politicians think they can get away with promising anything under the sun? It's because they have a replicator machine in the form of unlimited credit. And so they are able to promise to constituents all of these unaffordable entitlement programs, knowing that they can borrow in the future to preserve them until the system crash. And so if you choke their belief that they have unlimited borrowing capacity and you force them to deal with scarce resources, they will find themselves unable to make those promises. They will find themselves forced to prioritize. And this is how we get to Joe Wolverton's argument. Politically, only when there are scarce resources and a need to prioritize can you start winning the political debate over Article 1 and what the federal government should be doing. But if they think, if the population thinks there's a replicator machine in Washington that will give them anything they want at any price, and the politicians have got every incentive to do exactly that, we're never going to win the debate over the proper size and scope of the federal government. How can we with a bunch of folks that are just not philosopher kings?
Well, then let's just get behind the movement to abolish the Fed.
Bank from borrowing money.
Exactly.
It's run by the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let's have a question over here.
It's a bank
Sir?
inside the federal government.
Thank you, sir.
This is more of a comment. I believe you're right, and I believe you're right. I believe you're both right. And I think that we are in a crisis. That's what's come down here. This is what we're dealing with, a crisis, people. And I think that we need to do something about it now. And it's time that we're busy, all of us. We're all trustees of our country. And as Patrick Henry would say, give me liberty or give me death. We're at that point in time, as Nick says, within 3 to 7 years, this country will crash. How many people are going to die in a crash? What happened in the 30s? We are in trouble. We have got to work this out.
Let me just say
Thank you.
what the best thing that happened today was Joe suggesting the formation of some sort of consensus building committee. That is something that when I reached out to Joe 2 years ago, with the early draft of the compact, my goal was to try to attain. When I reached out to the John Birch Society leadership, when I reached out to Ms. Booster, when I reached out to Eagle Forum, I mean, that's what it is absolutely critical, and I welcome the overture, and I will absolutely pursue it. But you know, the thing is, if we agree on the principle that there's a time and place to use Article 5, the first place to start is figuring out the parameters. We can't use Article 5 when we have no free speech, when we're in the middle of a civil war, when we're chained in some concentration camp, right? So the parameters have to be something short of that.
Well, we're both lawyers, so let's have a list of stipulated facts, right? If we have a list of stipulated facts, things that the Article 5 side and the nullification whatever side could get together and agree to a list. Every time I fight a case, we do that. I exchange with the other lawyer a list of stipulated facts that we're just not going to argue about, that we agree on. I think we could.
Well, I'm very encouraged by that, Joe. I wish we did it 2 years ago.
You know, I don't an organization. I don't speak for an organization.
But anyway, the bottom line is we've got 3 to 7 years. We lost 2 years. Let's start moving now. We're not going to slow down the compact because we only got 3 to 7 years. But I do want to engage and find out if there's anything we can find out around.
Okay, in the interest of time, and we only have this room for a certain amount of time, so we're not going to be able to get to all the questions, but let me take one here from Jim in the front. I'm
Jim Johnson. I'm leaving exchange a few emails.
Speak up.
I would like
You'll have to speak loud enough for everybody here. I don't have a microphone.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment or two, and I do have a question for you.
It's a question, we don't have a lot of time.
I don't think giving the president new powers is adequate. I think we ought, if you're going to list the impoundments, it ought to be in the amendment to tell the president what the impoundment priorities are. You've set it up in here specifically aiming towards a national sales tax. You've set it up that any tax increase will require a supermajority, but you can instill a national sales tax at a simple majority, and it can be increased at any time at a simple majority.
How is that not a...
The real problem I see is the sales tax is the most inequitable form of tax there is. The poorer you are, the higher percentage of your income goes to the sales tax.
But there's a number of inaccurate statements you just made in that comment.
My question is, you put the word up on the screen, non-gameable, but you never explained it. Would you explain to these people what non-gameable means and how you're using it?
All right, well, let me back up and address the inaccurate statement you made about the amendment. Number one, it does not increase any power at all. Right now, in the current Supreme Court interpretation of the federal government's, under an interpretation of the excise tax power, which was in the original Constitution, all an excise tax is a commodity-based sales tax. And frankly, a very strong, plausible constitutional argument can be made that a VAT and a national sales tax are fully constitutional, even under the original understanding of the Constitution.
I'm not arguing
but hold on. So right now, as we speak, without an amendment, Congress with simple majorities can impose a national sales tax right now. So if this amendment simply requires that in order to do that, you have to get rid of all of your income taxes, which is what the amendment says. The price for a simple majority passage of a national sales tax in our amendment is eliminating the income tax. That is a step forward. Now, it's not perfect. I'd rather get rid of all taxes. I'd rather have a 9/10 vote requirement for any increased tax, but we're not playing games. We're trying to go to 38 states with ratification in places like Illinois. And you know what? The best we can hope for...
You need to read it.
That's not what he said.
You
need to read it.
Okay. Joe, would you like to respond with this?
No.
Okay. Other questions?
Read the bill.
Yeah, read it. I encourage everyone to read it. Read it very closely.
Mr. Corwin.
Thank you, and thank you guys. In terms of the debate, the move for an Article 5 convention is going to happen. The Goldwater Institute and a lot of their supporters are going to push, so this is going to occur. Joe, if you're going to debate this, you have to debate it on the facts. You can't stand there and run a country fair and say, I hate this and I hate that, and ask for amens, because first of all, it's not good to hate. And you pulling these stunts is not a legitimate debate. It might work in this room, but on the national stage, that's no way to do it. You didn't argue 90% of the factual, substantive matter. Okay. And this is going to move forward. So, if you really have arguments against the Article 5 convention, you have to make them. Okay. You can't say, give me an amen, I love it.
Please go to your Google machine.
No, wait a minute.
And type Joe Wolverton, Article 5.
Fair
and
enough.
If there are any less than 100 pages written on it, I'll eat the 100 pages that you printed out.
Do it here. That's why we came.
I don't have time.
Coming here. No, wait a minute.
I'd like to address that quickly. We can't do a debate format and follow rules of debate, or we would be here for quite a while.
Nick, the problem on your side is that you say people will do this and people will do that, then they don't do it. The amendment has to include, if you don't do this, you go to prison. Without that, this has no teeth. So they simply ignore it, and they go to 110%. If you don't put teeth in it, that's the structural flaw in the entire Constitution.
Well, the structural flaw is we've got to get to 38 states. So all we can do is move the needle. And we can make it more painful to do the right than to do the wrong thing than to do the right thing. That's the most that we can accomplish. And that is not good enough. That's why this is only the first launch. The compact is designed to launch repeatedly different amendment ideas. We want to get a foothold with the idea that can plausibly get to 38 states, even if it just moves the needle a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Let's do another question so we can get through some more. Randy?
I've got more.
Yes.
Thank you,
I'm sorry, John.
I'll talk quickly so we can save time. Just a quick observation. No one here is debating whether the Article 5 process exists or whether we want a balanced budget amendment. These are all conservative ideals that we want. The concern is that we can act as a double-edged sword. For example, if I understand correctly, the only delegate under the balanced budget amendment is Jan Brewer. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Warren Berger, said there is no legal way to limit or muzzle the actions of the Constitutional Convention. Nick, you had asked that. How bad can it be? Frankly, I don't want to find out how bad it can be. So my specific question is, if we're going to have 30-something delegates, and right now we have, we have Jan Brewer, John McCain, Jeff Flake, understand they're federal. We just voted to censure as we get some people that we trust in Jan Brewer, who will be the only delegate, and Flake McCain. Where are these principled delegates going to come from? Because I don't see them, and I don't trust the people that are out there.
If that's all there was to it, it's in as a reasonable perspective. In fact, we designed the compact to make sure that we straitjacket anybody who goes to this convention in 16 different ways. You should know that the delegate provision today in the compact designates the Senate President, Andrew Biggs, the House Speaker, Andy Tobin, and the governor. Now, believe me, I think that it would be nice to have maybe a governor like Governor Walker or something like that. But if I've got Andy Biggs in the room with Governor Brewer, I think we're going to be okay. And so
Medicaid expansion, duh.
Particularly, hold on a second.
Roll over.
Hold on a second. In particular, if you look at the fact that the compact lines up all of the rules in advance, all of the amendment in advance, it bars all the states from doing anything but what is specified. It bars the states from engaging in any ratification activity of anything other than the amendment it specifies. There are so many different protections built in that there's no hiding place. See, this is the thing about our political society. People don't just brazenly violate clear prohibitions. They look for the loopholes. They look for the loopholes, they look for the shadows, they look for the penumbras. That's how it actually works in politics. There are none in the compact. If they're going to violate the compact, they're going to have to violate one stop sign after another, it will be apparent, and if it succeeds, see, this is the thing. If you're going to say that's going to succeed, busting out of this straitjacket is going to succeed, then we have no hope, because that means nothing matters, and then we have nothing to lose but our chains anyhow. So, you know, the reality is, relative to the risks that we face with a runaway Washington, D.C., putting Jan Brewer, Andy Biggs, and Andy Tobin in a straitjacket to go to a place for 24 hours to vote up or down a particular amendment is the least thing we have to worry about. The greater thing we have to worry about is keeping that amendment power monopolized in Washington, where it currently is, where a simple majority of Congress, because it's 2/3 of a quorum, by the way, that can propose an amendment, not 2/3 of the whole number under current case law. So that means a simple majority of Congress right now could propose any amendment under the sun. To keep that locus of power in Washington is insane. It's insane. We need to bring it back for no other reason than if we keep it there, it will be used more likely than not against us in ways that if we move it here, it won't be.
Well, did that answer your question, John?
Well, if I understand the answer correctly, I should be comforted because Jan Brewer is going to represent, and then Andy Biggs, Andy Biggs would be there as well, but he opposes it. And then again, you said it was insane, but I'll defer back to Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Warren Burger. There is no legal way to limit or muzzle the actions of the Constitutional Convention. Again, where are these other delegates that...
Hold on. You keep arguing from authority. Let me tell you who supports Article 5 and the idea that it can be limited. If you really want to argue from authority, Ronald Reagan, Milton Friedman, Antonin Scalia, Judge Harold DeMoss, who's on our advisory council of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, me, Ilya Shapiro of Cato Institute, Shane Krauser. I mean, I could give you a list that is 10 times as long as any list of people who oppose the idea that states control this process. You know what? If for every Burger, you're going to have a Lawrence Tribe. And you know what? Burger is not an originalist. He's not an originalist. He was a Warren Court protege. He was picked by Nixon, like we so often do, to reverse the crazy decisions that were made by the Warren Court, and he kept them and expanded them. He was a suitor, and to rely on him as somehow a constitutional authority is as ridiculous as relying on Souter as a constitutional authority for a constitutional matter.
I don't think we should have a battle of who's a more authority than the other, because that's neither here nor there in the crisis that we find ourselves in. I think if what Nick says, if he could promise that, yeah, I'm all for that. Read the bill. You keep repeating, read the bill. Please read it, everyone. Please read it. Read it very closely, and on the other side of the bill, have the Constitution. And I want you to mark the bill every time it grants a power that is not granted in the Constitution, and then scan it and send it to me.
But your
It'll be pretty red.
position does not guarantee anything, and if it requires, it expects the voting public to be more educated. You have at least 20 years, if you started constitutional classes today, before you potentially have a voter electorate that would understand what the Constitution is. You have 50% of the voters low information voters. No clue for 20 years at least if you started educating today.
I agree with you. I'm just saying
That's his
that
job.
we cannot work for next 20. Well, no. Yeah, I'm in for that. I'm in for the next 20 educating our children, but that's not the point. The point is what Nick is saying, Nick cannot guarantee.
You can't guarantee your position either.
Exactly. So why not go with the option that is historically, legally, and constitutionally sound? Please read the bill. I'm going to do that. Please read the bill.
I support nullification in the form of the bill that is depriving state resources from the NSA that is currently pending in Arizona. That's great. There's lots of great nullification ideas. The problem, again, is there are 3 structural flaws that nullification can't address. Unlimited taxation, unlimited borrowing, no voice for the states in national policy making. That's the bottom line that nullification cannot address.
Okay, let's take another question. Beth, go ahead.
My question is to Joe. I was your first amen, by the way, so I was listening very...
Well, that's horrible, because that's not good debate procedure, so don't admit that.
But my question is, I mean, we elect our officials. How are we going to form I want to know how you propose to form an effective, productive, competent committee. That sounds warm and fuzzy to me, but how are we going to arrive at that committee? We have elected officials.
Well, we won't bring them.
No, we won't bring them.
Well, no. I think that there are people, listen, and this is where we get to this thing that I hate. And I do hate it. And you can say that I shouldn't hate it, but I hate it. That we have to sit here and agree on everything and disagree so vehemently on one thing.
Joe, I know you're...
I think, I'm not a hater. Not a hater. But I will tell you that I think that we can all come together. Look, I'm not talking about
That's the flaw. What mechanism?
I'm not talking
Read the
about
Constitution.
mechanism.
That's the mechanism.
Let's think about how to do it. How to form the committee of safety that I'm talking about?
It's your idea, you two haven't even read the bill about the committee.
I think the answer that I gave to a question that you said, let's come together and have a slate of stipulated facts.
Kumbaya.
Oh, really? That's as much as the debate as anything I said tonight.
Okay, let's do another question. Jeff?
So, Nick, hi.
Hey, Jeff.
Listening to you and what all this should do, right, on what and watching PowerPoint, it sounds fantastic, really nice. But I did read the bill. I'm a nuts and bolts guy, right? I read the bill word for word and annotate it.
Fantastic.
And look for precedent. Anyway. So listening to you say what it should do sounds great. But when I read it, I feel like there's a bait and switch going. Let me explain. Give you some examples. So it sounds good, and if it were really true, I'd actually support it, right? But here's where I think the bait and switch is. So we talk about the convention being closer to the states, right? And state legislators ratify, or the state legislature, sorry. But when you read the compact bill, right, it has the 3 delegates you mentioned going abroad, if you will, outside of the state. And the mechanism for ratification is with them. So, in fact, it's not the state legislatures doing the ratification. The bill says whatever those delegates vote on is thereby ratified with their vote on passage. But that's what the bill actually, that's what the bill says.
No.
Yes, it does,
and if you want me to find the citation, anybody has a copy, I'll do it in 30 seconds.
Jeff, you're a very smart man, but that's not what the bill says.
Yes, it does.
It's not what the bill says. I mean, I don't know how do I have an argument with it? Yes, there is. No, it isn't.
Nick, secondly,
Give me the
It's
quote.
not good debate.
we talk about limits. We talk about limits.
No, don't go
Without
giving
the
away.
quote.
Hold the quote that you tell that you
I don't have it with me, but I'm
Okay,
happy
all
if
right.
anybody has a copy.
Well, I
read the bill, I'll
drafted
find
the
it in
thing,
30
for God's
seconds.
sake. I kind of know what it
We
says.
talk about, that's the BPA. That's not the bill I'm talking about. So let me give you an example. I work on property tax issues and have for many years. So I'm down at the city of Phoenix every year when they pass the budget. When they review their numbers, right, for that one item on the agenda, they call a state of emergency for the city. So they do not review their revenue numbers and calculations in front of everybody. They adjourn to a private chamber, do their calculations, and then reconvene to pass the budget. So how is that different? You have an emergency exemption where if they call it emergency, they can exceed the limit. So that's no limit. In fact, when they passed the NDAA every 2 years, reauthorizing exceptional military expenditures, which is typical and having done since 71, Congress declares a state of emergency. It's in the bill. They declare a state of emergency, pass the measure under continuing states of
what
exceptional
emergency are you
emergencies,
talking?
and
What
then go back to
specific
normal business.
emergency are you talking about? Because there is only one emergency provision, and it deals with the rules of the convention. It has
No, it's in the BBA.
No, there's
You
no,
showed it on your slide.
the BBA has, the balanced budget amendment has no exceptions, no emergency carve-outs, no national war crisis, nothing like that at all. There is a very simple process. It designates a fixed line of credit There is only one way to increase that fixed line of credit, and that's for Congress to refer out a proposal to the states and for the simple majority of the state legislatures to approve it or deny it. That's all there is. There's no emergency clause.
Okay, and I'll trust what you say because there's versions floating around.
Well, we did that deliberately because what we're trying to do is reintroduce the states into national policy, pre-17th Amendment style, in a targeted way, so that we can then start educating the populace that this isn't the scariest thing in the world, and also because we actually think that for every one we lose over that debt limit debate in the states, we're going to win one, which is a hell of a lot better than what we're seeing in Washington, where we lose every last one of them.
Now, within the BDA, it then talks about the president's ability to stop defense spending, to stay under the limit. Does that not move sequester power from Congress to the president?
No.
But it specifies.
No. Remember, what happens, let's say you hit the debt limit. Today, we hit the debt limit, right? You literally cannot, you don't have the money to pay the bills. The treasurer physically and properly has to pick and choose among the bills to pay, right? That is impoundment, delaying or reprioritizing the bills that you don't have money to pay. It's implied in the executive branch if for whatever reason they don't have the money.
Because it happens to them.
Because how else would they do business? They just don't pay anything? I mean, it's implied because there's no other way to run the executive branch. That's the only true implied power.
So lastly, we talk about we could prevent or repeal Obamacare. But our conservative, sorry to use air quotes, but our conservative governor voted for expansion. But she will be present, should this all pass, she will be present at a convention where at least one state, I think it's actually 3 states or 4 now that we know of, are calling for an amendment to put Obamacare in the convention, in the Constitution, something she supported, something she signed.
Yeah, but the compact.
So how will that stop Obamacare?
Okay, let me just explain how the compact works real quickly. This is structurally. All right, first of all, nothing happens except a commission is organized with the job of running logistics, literally sending notices. That's it. Nothing happens until 38 states join the compact. 38 states have to have agreed within. Mind you, there's a 7-year sunset, so we're not talking 50 years from now.
We have 34 now, and I think we're the 35th or 36th.
No.
There's 34 already who would call out.
No.
Correct?
The compact has a conditional enactment specific to the compact that says the specific application for a convention in the compact does not go live, it doesn't count, it is dormant until 38 states join and agree to everything in the compact. So, that has to happen within 7 years, otherwise the sunset actually auto-repeals the whole thing.
Okay, so compact sounds good.
Okay, so slow down. Let me just explain this. So nothing happens until you have a super majority of the states.
Under the compact.
Under the compact.
But we now have an open, if we pass the one bill with the call, and the resolution with the call in, we now have an open call. So you could have a condition where we're the 35th or 36th, we'll be the 35th or 36th with an open call. The compact doesn't pass or never gets enacted, but the convention is called anyway because the requisite number of states have applied for relief to Congress.
I can't stop.
So now, well, that's the point. That's
But
the danger.
that's
exactly the danger.
That's going to happen whether we
So
use a
you
compact or
can't
not.
say that the compact restricts the convention if the compact's never enacted.
No, the compact only restricts the convention the compact organizes. It doesn't have anything to do with whatever George Soros is doing. We can't stop him. So this is my opening point. Right. You know, Article 5 doesn't go away if we don't use it.
The compact will do this.
All that.
The compact hasn't been enacted.
That's right, because Article 5, 38 states can call a convention anyway.
Compact will limit that particular.
Okay.
When Congress called it, only Congress can call it.
I have to call the meeting to the close. I appreciate your comments. Charles, I want